Republicans are already plotting the evisceration of the current system, and they're planning for when they take power of Congress in 2015. So news is out today from Reuters that, according to the GOP, the way that we currently calculate economic growth at the Congressional Budget Office and the Joint Committee on Taxation, they say it's all off, it doesn't make sense the way we do it, and now we're going to change it. So for those of you who don't know, the way that we do make policy decisions and budget decisions and the way that we get numbers to come to conclusions, it's based off of a projection formula which says that whatever the economic growth was this month, just assume that for next month it's going to be exactly the same, and then you make your projections based off of that. So there's no, you don't account for the wild swings in the economy, which do always happen, granted. But most of the time it's, give or take, it's stable from month to month. It's usually fairly stable, bar, the Great Recession, the Great Depression, and situations like that. So it's a fairly stable economic model for these guys to crunch numbers and come up with, deficit projections, for example, when there's some sort of tax policy that's being debated. So the Republicans said, no, we don't like the way that it's being done. So they plan on using a projection method called dynamic scoring. Now, what is that? They say, quote, critics say wider use of dynamic scoring as the Republican-favored approach would introduce new uncertainties into fiscal policy and degrade the value of present analysis now done by Capitol Hill staff experts. Republican advocates argue it would make fiscal analysis better reflect what they call economic realities. Dynamic scoring, as they envision it, would assume that lower tax rates boost growth, offsetting some lost revenue. So in other words, their way of crunching the numbers is assume trickle-down economics works and factor that into every single projection you make. Now, the only problem with that is trickle-down economics, of course, doesn't work. I mean, how much evidence do you need? We had trickle-down economics implemented in the early 1900s, in the 1910s, and the 1920s, and what happened? There was a boom-bust cycle. That's what happens when you do trickle-down economics. The economy takes off, and then it goes straight down and it plummets. 1929 was the stock market crash, and it was the Great Depression. Why? Because it was all wealth. It wasn't real wealth. It was all speculative bubbles. But they're saying, no, assume that whenever you cut taxes, that's going to lead to economic growth. And by the way, that will skew the deficit projections. Because, again, this is the Republican idea that's just crazy, where they say, no, you don't get it. If you cut taxes, you'll actually reduce the deficit. I mean, that's just flat out math denialism. Because if you cut taxes, you are literally cutting revenue to the government. So, of course, you're going to create a bigger deficit. Of course, there's going to be a money shortfall. How do you not see that? And they say, well, you don't get it. The reason is that when you cut the taxes, there will be a tremendous economic boom and tremendous economic growth, and then therefore, you'll actually take in more revenue. You will net take in more revenue. It's an interesting hypothesis. It just turns out that it's factually incorrect, and it doesn't work that way. So now, when Republicans give us numbers in 2015 and 2016 to try to trumpet their budget proposals, the numbers are going to be all wrong. They're going to say, yeah, our budget proposal would, reduce the deficit and give us a surplus of $18 billion or whatever, just making numbers up here. And they're going to use that, and they're going to talk about the positive outcomes of their ideas and the negative ones of the Democrat. But the problem is that the tool they're using to measure it is skewed in their favor. It's biased in their favor. So they just want to flat out rig the measuring system for the economy to bias it towards their policies. I mean, that's like if the Democrats were to do something similar, it would be the Democrats saying, well, let's just assume that every single social program that we could ever conceive of and create and put into place is going to net increase GDP and reduce the deficit and have all these positive effects. What would the Republicans say if we said that? You can't say that! That's not true! You're just biasing the measuring system in your favor. That's right. That is what that would be. But that's not what the Democrats are doing. The Democrats are like, let's just assume the economic growth is going to be the same. Let's just look at the numbers objectively. Let's just allow this to be a nonpartisan thing where the CBO calculates the numbers in a way that's not in any way leaning left or right or towards the Democrats or the Republicans. That's the Democratic idea. The Republicans just want to blow up the system and say, fuck it, just make it so that no matter what, our policies look better than their policies. I warned you, man. I told you there was an article in Vox, and we spoke about it at the time, where I forget who wrote it, but the author said, well, the Republicans don't want to re-up this nonpartisan leader of the CBO, and, maybe that's a bad sign, but the CBO historically has never become partisan, so we can't say if the Republicans are going to try to make it a political arm. And what did I say at the time? Yeah, no, if they didn't want to make it political, if they didn't want to make it partisan, you know what they could have done? Re-upped the guy who was nonpartisan. Re-upped the guy who was doing a good job. If you're getting rid of that guy, obviously you have something nefarious in mind where you want to change the leader not to have another objective person, nonpartisan person. You want to put in somebody who's going to help you out. I called it at the time. Every article I read at the time was like, well, it's doubtful that the Republicans will try to make the CBO partisan. Well, here you go. Now they're making it partisan. So now it's the old idea that, well, if you don't like the odds, just change the way that we calculate the odds.